This video is going to cover the topic of unit rate review. Be sure the date and topic are at the top of your page. The essential question for this video is, what is unit rate and how do you calculate it? And this video should be a reminder of a topic that you have practiced before, but we'll start with a few vocabulary terms just to remind you. The first term is rate, and that is a specific type of ratio where you are comparing two things, but they are two different quantities, two different types of quantities. For example, if you calculate that you have gone 5 miles in 2 hours, you're doing a ratio comparing miles and hours, right? Two different types of quantities. And that leads us to unit rate, which is a specific type of rate in which one of the quantities is 1. An example of this would be saying that it is 2.5 miles in 1 hour, right? So one of the quantities here is 1. And it's also common to use the word per. So 2.5 miles per hour. And we calculate unit rate in various ways. One way is setting up proportions. For example, if a car travels 420 miles in 7 hours and we want the speed in miles per hour, meaning we want 1 hour's worth, we can set up a proportion, which means equal ratios. And in our proportion, we know that it's 420 miles for 7 hours and we want just 1 hour. So to keep our ratios equivalent, we would divide 7 by 7 to get 1. And 420 by 7 to figure out the rate per hour. And of course, 420 divided by 7 is 60, so we know it would be 60 miles per hour would be the unit rate. A second example shows us that Ezekiel purchased 5 pounds of grapes for a total of $7.96, and we want to find the price per pound, right? Meaning we want to know what the unit rate is for 1 pound. And again, I can use proportions to set this up. So I have $7.96 for 1 pound as one of my ratios, and I of course want to divide by 5 to find 1 pound, and I have to be consistent and do the same for both parts of my ratio. And so we would divide $7.96 by 5. And when I do that, I actually get 1 592 thousandths, but money is of course only counted to the hundredths place. So I have to see if this is closer to $1.59 or $1.60. And this number in the thousandths place is less than 5, so I'm just going to cut it off, which means it would be $1.59 per pound. And the ratio, setting up the proportion, is a great way to know that we're dividing in the correct order, but you can also do it without the ratio. So let's see our two examples again. In our first one, if you are looking for miles per hour, right, the miles per 1 hour, you would divide the miles by the number of hours, which is what we did, right? And in our second example, when we wanted the price for 1 pound, we divided the price by the number of pounds, right? So sometimes it's easy to remember which number to divide by which. Other times, the ratio or proportion might just help you make sure you're doing it in the right way. One thing unit rates are useful for is comparing ratios. If you want to know what's a better deal, who's faster, what takes longer, it's good to have a unit rate as a way to do a comparison. So for example, at Fred Meyer, you could buy a 6-pack of bagels for $2.28, or you could buy a baker's dozen, which is 13 bagels, for $4.81. And it's not immediately obvious which of these is the better deal, but we can decide by looking at the unit rate. So we want to know the price per bagel. And since we want the price per bagel, we can divide the price by the number of bagels. So the first one, that means we would take our price and divide it by the number of bagels. And for our second option, we would take the price and divide it by the number of bagels, and then we can compare. If you take a moment to calculate this, you would find that our first price would be, I believe, 38 cents per bagel. And if you calculate the second option, you would find that it would be 37 cents per bagel. Not a huge difference, right? But when we get the price for one bagel, we can easily see which one is cheaper, right? And that, of course, is option B. So finding the unit rate helps us compare these ratios. Similarly, we can use unit rate to decide who is faster, so we can find someone's speed by figuring out how fast they can go in every 1 unit of time, 1 second, 1 minute, 1 hour, and so on. So again, in this example, it's not immediately obvious who was faster, right? Because they went different distances and they went during a different period of time. So we want to find their speed in meters per second to compare. And by doing so, that means we want to divide their meters by how long they went, right? How many seconds they took to do it. So for Elliot, that means we need to divide his 20 meters by 32 seconds. And for Parker, that means we need to divide his 15 meters by 24 seconds to figure out how far they went in 1 second. And if I went ahead and did that for Elliot, I would find that it's a fractional amount, right? He would go 625 thousandths meters per second. So less than a meter in every second. And then I can do the same thing for Parker and see what I get when I do that. And that will also be less than 1 meter. And in fact, when I do my calculations here on the side, I find that it ends up being the exact same speed. And something else we can do once we know the unit rate of whatever it is we're working with is that we can turn it actually into an equation to help us figure out how far, in this case, they could go for any amount of time. So if we're looking at their speed, we know that their distance that they travel will be 625 thousandths of a meter for every second that they travel. And I can write that in as an equation, and then I can substitute in, and we'll worry about that a little bit more in another upcoming video. But if it was 10 seconds, I could multiply their speed by 10. If it was 20 seconds, I could multiply their speed by 20, and so on. So we can actually make equations once we figure out unit rates. But I'm going to just leave you with one more kind of basic unit rate to try on your own. So if Mr. Atkinson, who bikes pretty fast, bikes 27 miles in 3 hours, I want you just to find his unit speed in miles per hour. So go ahead and fill in his speed in miles per hour, so how far he can go in just 1 hour, and then use that and tell me how far he would go, please, in 7 hours. See if you can then extrapolate that information. And remember that the essential question of this video was, what is unit rate and how do you calculate it? And hopefully this was a review for you, but we will be using this to add on and do new and different things with it this year. Be sure to have your notes and any questions for class.